Welcome to the Just Motherhood podcast. I'm your host, Isabella, and I'm so glad you're here. This is a space where we come together to embrace the real, raw, and beautiful journey of motherhood. Here, we'll navigate the challenges of motherhood together, and my goal is to offer support and encouragement to help you show up as your best self and thrive in your role as a mom. Whether you're currently pregnant, adjusting to postpartum life, or you're a seasoned mom, you have found a community that gets it. So grab a cozy spot, maybe a cup of coffee, and let's get started. Hey friends, and welcome back to the Just Motherhood podcast. I'm so excited to be sharing episode 2 with all of you. If you missed it last week, I officially launched this podcast with a brief episode 1, and really I just kind of shared the goal and the mission of this podcast as well as introduce myself. So if you want to go back and listen to episode 1, if you haven't listened to it already, that would be a super amazing thing and it would mean a lot to me. As you are listening to this podcast, it also would really help me if you take the time to follow my podcast or subscribe, and also consider leaving a review. My goal with this podcast is to come alongside you to help you show up as your best self, no matter if you're facing the best moments of motherhood or some really difficult seasons. And the best way that I'm able to do that is by having all of you take a moment to give me some support so that I can continue to reach other moms. So thank you again for being here. And like I said, I'm super excited for this episode. And this is actually something that has been on my heart for so long. And it is the topic of self-care. I've taken a couple times throughout my TikTok journey to make posts about self-care because I think it's so important for us moms to talk about it, but it's so fun to actually sit down and do a full-length podcast episode about it. Self-care is something that I honestly haven't always been the best at, and if you're anything like me, you probably really struggled with knowing what self-care was even before you became a mom. I never had a good relationship with it, and yes, I would do things here and there, and I had hobbies or I would hang out with friends, but I truly never knew what it was that made me tick. I never knew what the things were that refueled me or refreshed me, and then when I got to motherhood, I found that I was empty. I couldn't give any more because I had nothing in me to give. I was drained, I was getting overwhelmed, and I truly just felt so restless because I didn't know how to refuel myself properly. Now, while I am going to share all of my experience, everything that I share is simply just suggestions. My hope is that you take everything that I say and you try to figure out what works best for you. I'm going to talk about 5 main areas of self-care, and then I'm going to give you some examples of specific self-care activities within those areas. And hopefully you're able to take time over the next couple days, next few weeks, or next few months and learn how to implement some of those habits into your daily life and figure out what you need to do to refuel and refresh yourself. Now, before we jump in, I do want to make a disclaimer. Self-care is not selfish. I feel like in the motherhood mom community, it is almost a taboo topic to discuss self-care. It's like something like, oh, you don't do that. You don't need time away from your kids. You're going to get the mom guilt and you're a bad mom if you do this and XYZ, blah, blah, blah. Like, it feels like you aren't allowed to refuel yourself, but it's actually the best thing that you can do for your children and for your family to have time of self-care. Because really, let's think about it. In motherhood, if you don't practice self-care, if you don't know how to rest, refuel, and recharge, then you're going to run down. You're going to be on empty. You're going to have nothing left in your cup to give. You may start to feel overwhelmed, drained, checked out. You might feel like a failure. You might feel like you don't know how to be a mom anymore and show up in a way that is best for your family and for your kids. And when that happens, you're probably living on edge. Your kid does something that seems so minute, but that's the thing that sets you off. Your husband forgets to make the bed in the morning and you just about lose it. You truly start to live in a state of mental, physical, emotional, spiritual, and psychological unrest. You're not healthy if you don't practice self-care. Self-care is not selfish because it's giving you the time and the space to refuel yourself so that you can show up as your best self, not only for you, which is super important, but also for your children and for your husband and for your friends, basically anybody in your circle. If you don't take the time that you need to prioritize yourself and your needs, then you won't show up as the best mom and wife that you can be. I also want to make a disclaimer that self-care is not bubble baths and desserts and binge watching Netflix. Like, I feel like so many people are like, oh, I'm doing a little bit of self-care. And we'll kind of get into some of the specifics of what self-care actually is. But a lot of that ends up being self-indulgence. Self-indulgence is running to things that are actually kind of like keeping us away from our problems. It's like giving us those spaces to just check out, or we're running for like a dopamine hit of, oh, this thing is going to make me feel really great, so I'm going to do it. But that's not really the best thing that would recharge us. Like, don't get me wrong, I love sitting down to watch Grey's Anatomy, but watching 5 episodes of Grey's Anatomy is not going to refuel my cup. Now, if I watch 1 episode and then I decide to go journal about my feelings, that's a different story. But ultimately, we have to start to learn to separate self-care from self-indulgence. And that's the goal of this podcast episode as we dive into these 5 different areas of really learning about what self-care is and how we can best implement it into our lives. What self-care is it's the activities that we do to maintain good health and to improve our well-being. Another way to think about it is it's doing something today that your future self will thank you for. It's kind of like you're making the sacrifices today, even though you may not want to do it, but you're doing it because you're caring for yourself. It's like working out or eating better foods or meeting up with a friend, taking a shower. Like, it's meeting those basic needs that you have that the version of you either tomorrow or a year from now is going to be so glad that you built that habit and took the time to take care for yourself. So let's jump into the 5 main types of self-care. I'm going to share briefly about those areas, and then I'm also going to provide you with some practical examples so that you can try to implement self-care activities in those areas. Now, all the examples that I give you are actually a part of an assessment that helps you go through the 5 areas and kind of see where you are doing well and where you can maybe make improvements. If you're interested in that assessment, because if you're a hands-on person like me and you love tests, totally a nerd sitting over here with my hand up in the closet while I'm recording this. But if you like doing assessments and things like that, please email me at justisabellaj@gmail.com. My email is also in the show notes. So if you want the assessment, I'm more than happy to send it to you. The first area of self-care that we need to focus on as moms is our physical self-care. This is probably the biggest area that is of most importance, besides the second one that we'll talk about in a minute. But you have to sit back and think how much of your physical self has been given away to your children since you began your motherhood journey. From day one, your body has been making sacrifices to care for this child. Since the moment your child was conceived, your body has sacrificed, and it continues to do so. Whether it's through a lack of sleep, maybe not eating enough, maybe not prioritizing your hygiene needs, maybe it's through not being able to work out or eat healthier foods. Your body is constantly making sacrifices because you're just trying to keep other little mini humans alive, which is an amazing thing, but we can't do that task well if we're not focusing on our body. And so as we talk about these examples of physical self-care, I do also want to say that physical self-care is not me saying you need to exercise and lose all your pregnancy weight. It's not me saying bounce back, lose the mom bod, lose the mom pooch. Like, none of that is what I am trying to say. However you want to go about your journey as a mom and focusing on your body and your physical self-care is all up to you. If that includes losing weight, that is awesome and more power to you. If it's not, and it's focusing on getting better sleep or whatever that looks like, that is totally amazing and awesome. My goal is just that you show up as your best self physically. A quote that I've heard recently is, A lot of parents say they would die for their kids, but are they willing to live for them? And that is something that I have honestly really taken to heart, especially the past several months. And I'm not going to lie, I was on a weight loss journey before I became a mom, and I was only a month in before I got pregnant. And now I've been back on this journey after having my son. And it was, oh, I want to lose weight. Like that's always been a big thing and a big insecurity of mine. But lately it's become, no, I want to be able to go run around with my kid and go on a hike or go cycling or go swimming. Like I want to show up and do all these things that I physically have not been able to do because I've been overweight. And some of it is me being overweight makes me really out of breath and makes my body ache and I get really tired quickly. And it's really no longer about the numbers on the scale, which yes, it is something I still celebrate, but it's ultimately about how I want to be able to show up for my son and any future children that I have. And that's really the ultimate goal with self-care. Is it shouldn't be about losing weight, gaining weight, looking at numbers on the scale, but how can you show up for your family? Like what are the goals that you have that you want to accomplish physically with your family? And then focus on doing self-care to help you reach those goals. So examples of physical self-care can include eating healthy foods, taking care of personal hygiene, which this is a big one. If you're a mom, please start getting a shower in more frequently than you are. Exercise. And again, that's not to lose weight always. Sometimes it's just about moving our body. Wearing clothes that help me feel good about myself, which is huge when you're a mom and your body has completely changed so it feels like nothing fits you correctly anymore. Find those clothes that you love and that you feel confident in. Eat regularly, eating all 3 meals a day and maybe a snack or 2. Participate in fun activities. This would be like walking, swimming, dancing, sports, just things that kind of move your body in a fun way where it's not necessarily like exercise where you're sticking to a routine. Get enough sleep. This is huge, especially if your children are on a better sleep schedule where you have the ability to get a long period of uninterrupted sleep. Please prioritize that. Go to preventative medical appointments. So this is your annual checkups. Mama, you are the most important person probably in your family, and you got to stay on top of your health so that you can always be present and always be focused on your family. And then the last form of physical self-care is just resting when you're sick. It's taking the time to lay down or maybe not cook dinner and get takeout, whatever that looks like for you. But don't always be in go, go, go mode. You will run yourself down and it is not going to feel good for you. So take a moment to reflect on your physical self-care. What are your goals that you have and what can you do to help yourself get to those? What do you do well, and where can you make improvements over the next several weeks or months so that you can show up as your best self physically? The second form of self-care, this is probably right up there with number 1, is psychological and emotional self-care. Becoming a mom is probably one of the most emotional experiences. You have high highs, low lows, baby blues, and throw in all the struggles that most of us have with mental health, like postpartum depression and postpartum anxiety. Your emotions are all over the place. And it can be really hard because some of it's hormonal, some of it's stuff that we've brought with us into motherhood, and some of it is just random things happening to us that we're reacting to. But it's important for us to take the time to learn how to be well and healthy emotionally. We are raising not just babies, but adults, and we have to learn how to regulate our emotions and show up in healthy ways for our children and for our families. And we can only do that when we take the time and space needed to focus on building healthy emotional habits. This is just a random throw out there, but I personally really love the book Emotional Intelligence 2.0. It's something that I read in college and I've reread it a couple times since then. And I think it is hands down one of the best books about learning emotional intelligence, but it truly teaches you how to deal with your emotions and also how to show up as a better version of yourself. So examples of emotional self-care looks like taking time off work, school, and other obligations. This includes motherhood duties or stay-at-home mom duties that you do. Participate in hobbies, finding those things that refuel you when you've had a long day. Is it coloring? Is it reading? Is it playing an instrument? Is it going on a walk or just sitting outside? Is it baking? Is it cooking? Like, find those things that you love to do that refuels you. And one thing that I will say with the hobbies that may be a challenge, find a hobby that has nothing to do with your children. And I know that may seem hard, but you have to learn your identity outside of your children and outside of motherhood. Some of my instruments. And so find those things for you that kind of goes back to who you used to be before motherhood, or maybe who you want to turn into now that you've faced motherhood. But find hobbies outside of your family and children. Other examples include getting away from distractions. That's your phone, social media, emails. Learn how to put it down and put your phone on Do Not Disturb. Learn new things unrelated to work, school, or motherhood. So this is just like learning about your world. Express your feelings in a healthy way. So that's talking to other people, creating art, journaling, which journaling is a huge one I love, and I'm happy to answer any questions about that if you have them. Recognize your own strengths and achievements. Think about how many amazing things you've done as a mom and stop with the negative self-talk. You are an amazing, strong, beautiful, powerful, exceptional woman, and stand strong in that. Go on vacations or day trips, get out of the house, get out of your city, have a little bit of fun. Do something comforting, watch a favorite movie, take a long bath, which I know from my note in the beginning seems like, didn't she just say not to do that? Yes, but if you're going to do something comforting, do it with the intention of, I'm using this as an outlet to comfort myself. So if you're going to watch a show, maybe it's watching something that you actually enjoy instead of just putting something on to zone out, and put some parameters on that. Hey, I'm only going to watch this for an hour. Hey, I'm just going to take a bath for 45 minutes and I'm going to maybe listen to a podcast while I take a bath. Like, make it a form of self-care instead of a form of just zoning out. Find reasons to laugh. Laughter is the best medicine. Talk about my problems, whether that's with a professional, your husband, a friend, or somebody else in your life. So take a moment and think about your overall emotional self-care. Think about maybe some goals that you have and showing up as your best self emotionally, and how you can learn to regulate your emotions so that you can show up as a good mom and teach your kids how to be emotionally healthy. What do you do well in this area, and where can you make improvements over the next couple of weeks? Number 3 is social self-care. Social self-care is probably our most neglected form of self-care for a lot of moms. I know for me it is. I think we always hear about people saying, oh, you need a village, you need to have people. And then you kind of look around and you're like, I only have like as many people that I can count with on one hand. Like, that is kind of me. My husband is my best friend, and I mainly hang out with like my mom and my sister otherwise. So this is definitely an area that I am still learning how to get better at, but I do feel like I'm starting to get better at it than I was in early motherhood. And this may be something you relate to, and so definitely make sure that you listen to the examples I give so that you can take steps to make friends and build that village that we always hear about. It's so healthy for us to be able to connect with women that are in our own season from us, but also taking the steps to learn from women who are seasons ahead of us, and then also pour into women who are seasons behind us. Examples of social self-care include spending time with people that you like, which is a big one. Make sure you actually enjoy these people's company. Write or call friends and family who are far away, doing that on a consistent, regular basis. Having stimulating conversations, which is huge if you are a stay-at-home mom like me. You need to have those stimulating conversations with either your spouse, friends, or anybody else, rather than talking to babies and toddlers all day long. Meet new people. Find ways that you can connect with people either through groups, maybe through your church, through your civic center. A lot of libraries have mommy and me classes or some kind of a toddler group. So find ways that you can meet new people. Spend time alone with your romantic partner, taking the time to have literally alone one-on-one time with your spouse so that y'all can reconnect and spark up that friendship again, especially if it feels like you've been more in that roommate or teammate phase, as I like to say, learning how to get back into that loving phase and that best friend phase. It's so important for us to have consistent alone time with our husbands. Ask others for help when needed. That is something that I really struggle with, and I did well before I was in motherhood, but I almost felt like when I became a mom that I had to do it all and know how to do it all and be great at everything that I was doing. And it's just not the reality that we live in. And it is totally okay and strong to ask other people for help. So please do it when you need it. Do enjoyable activities with other people. Getting together and having some kind of a shared interest is so beneficial for us. And I encourage you, whether it's other moms or just other women your age, find things that you can do with them, whether it's crafting or going on walks. Like, it can be so refreshing to connect with other women doing an activity besides just sitting down and having coffee together. Have intimate time with my romantic partner, and I am not talking just about sexual intimacy. I'm also talking about all the other forms of intimacy, like intellectual intimacy, emotional intimacy, proximal intimacy. Like, there's so many forms of intimacy, and we lose a lot of that when we step into parenthood, and it can be hard for us to come together with these intimate intentions. So just make sure that you prioritize that with your husband. And the last example I have is just to keep in touch with old friends, and obviously make sure that those are old friends you want to keep in your life, but stay consistent in communication with them. Take a minute and think about your overall social self-care. What do you do well? Where could you make improvements? And what are some things that you can implement over the next few days, weeks, or months to help you become more social and build a community around you? Our fourth form of self-care is spiritual self-care. It is so helpful for us to focus on our faith and to never lose sight of the bigger picture in motherhood. We are spiritual beings, and it is important that we nurture that side of ourselves. And if you are a Christian like me, being a mom is not just like a random role. We didn't just randomly have these children. Like, God called us to motherhood. And if we start to lose sight of who raising children is for, it can start to feel overwhelming and exhausting. We have to stay connected to our Creator. We have to stay connected to the Father. And that is the best way for us to show up as a healthy and filled mom. Examples of spiritual self-care include spending time in nature. Being in creation is one of the most refreshing things to me. Meditating, this can be if you enjoy the activity of meditating, or even just meditating on scripture, or maybe quotes that really encourage you, just continuing to think about them and asking God to give you new insights and revelations into what those words mean. Taking time to pray. This is the best way that you can stay connected with God, is praying consistently. Try to make it a part of your daily habit, spending time in prayer. Recognizing the things that give meaning to my life. Act in accordance with my morals and my values. Set aside time for thought and reflection. This is huge because in motherhood, I bet most of us don't set aside any quiet time for us just to think and to reflect on our day and reflect on the things that we're learning and doing. Please start setting aside that time. Participate in a cause that is important to me. This can be volunteering with different organizations, maybe even just donating to one if you're unable to get out and volunteer. It could also be just getting more plugged in at your church and looking for opportunities to serve or volunteer within your local communities. And the last example is to appreciate art that is impactful to me. This could be music, film, literature. Just focus on things that you feel like are impactful in your life and bring you some kind of refreshment. So think about your overall spiritual self-care. What are you doing well? Where can you make improvements? And what steps can you practically take over the next couple weeks to focus on this area of self-care? Our last form of self-care is professional self-care. But if you are a stay-at-home mom like me, this is exactly the kind of self-care you need to focus on too. Professional self-care just means what you do for your job, which being a stay-at-home mom is one of the toughest jobs out there. So all of these things can be applied to you. It's important for us to focus on this area of self-care because we can spend a lot of time and energy pouring into the things that we do during the day. And then by the time we get home, we have no energy to focus on these other forms of self-care. So if we don't learn how to put in healthy boundaries with our professional callings, then we won't be able to show up in the previous 4 forms of self-care. So examples of professional self-care includes improving your professional skills. So whatever you do for your job, finding ways to get better at it, finding ways to be more efficient. If it's saying no to excessive new responsibilities, we all have so much on our plate. And sometimes it feels like the best answer is yes. And I know for me, I'm a people pleaser and it feels like I need to say yes so I can prove that I'm worthy, that I have it all together. But that's not helping anybody because in the long run, I'm probably going to be stressed out and not show up as my best. And now, if you're a stay-at-home mom, that may even be saying no to yourself, that you may think of new ideas and activities and things that you need to do with your family or your kids, but sometimes you may not have the capacity to do it. And it's okay to learn how to say no to yourself too. Another example is taking on projects that are interesting or rewarding. So finding things in your job or if you're a stay-at-home mom around your house that you can work on and make a timeline for it and learn about it and just invest your skills and your giftings into it, and you can find so much reward in that project. Learn new things related to your profession or stay-at-home mom life. Make time to talk and build relationship with colleagues, which if you're a stay-at-home mom would probably just be other stay-at-home moms, finding mommy and me groups, stuff like that. Take breaks during work. We all need a lunch break, whether you work a 9 to 5 or you stay home. So make sure you get an adequate break. Take a couple minutes every few hours or whatever and just have a break. Take a lap around your house or your office. Have some water, have a snack. You need a break because mentally you are going to feel so much better when you sit back down to do whatever you're trying to do once you've given yourself a little bit of a break. Maintain balance between my professional and personal life, which I feel like if you work a 9 to 5, whether you work remote or in the office, it's kind of easy because you clock in, you clock out. And of course, there are some people that struggle with bringing work home and continuing to work through the evening hours or even on weekends, which that's a whole nother discussion for another day. But learn how to shut off and have your personal life in one space and your professional life in another. If you're a stay-at-home mom, this definitely becomes a lot more complex, and I am planning to make a future podcast episode about this, so make sure you stay tuned. Keep a comfortable workspace that allows you to be successful, making sure it feels either aesthetically pleasing to you, it's clean, it's organized. It's just a space where you can sit in and you feel like, hey, I can get anything done today because the space around me is radiating good energy. It feels calming to me. It feels not chaotic and stressful because there's not clutter everywhere. Like, figure out what that space looks like for you. And the last one, this is definitely more towards the professional side, but advocating for fair pay, benefits, and other needs, which as a stay-at-home mom, you do need to make sure you advocate, whether it's to your spouse or your family, about any needs that you have and making sure that your needs are heard because you deserve to have your needs met even if you are staying home. Take a moment to think about your overall professional self-care. What do you do well and where can you make improvements? Now, as I said at the beginning of the podcast episode, I am definitely no professional when it comes to self-care, but it is something I have gotten a lot better at since about last fall. That's when I really started to implement a lot of my self-care, and everything that I shared is not stuff that I do every day, and I'm not expecting you to sit down and start doing all these things. The goal is for you to listen to my examples, and maybe that sparks new ideas in your head that I didn't even list, Or maybe there are some things that I said that really resonated with you and you feel like you want to take them into your daily or weekly lives and building habits and routines based off those practices. Now, I know that you're also probably thinking, Isabella, you said a lot of really great stuff, but how do I actually do all this as a mom? It's a really great question if that's what you're thinking. And next week, I'm actually going to be sharing part 2 of this episode, which is specifically focused on how to implement self-care into your schedule and your routines. So we're going to talk all the tips and tricks for how I actually get self-care done. We'll talk everything from the newborn phase to the toddler phase and up from there. So make sure you stay tuned. Episode 3 will be coming out a week from now, and you can tune in to learn how to actually do self-care. But until that episode comes out, my goal for you is just to take the time and space you need to figure out what self-care looks like for you. Try to figure out some of the things that you can go ahead and implement into your life, because I'm sure that there's some things that I listed out that are like instant, like, yep, that's me. I don't do that thing. I know I don't do that well, and that's an easy switch. And then there's going to be some things that are probably going to be a little bit harder because it's the complete opposite of what you're currently doing. So next week we will talk about building out the space and time for that, but think about what you want to do better at. And don't forget, if you are interested in the assessment that can help you identify what areas of self-care you need to work on, and specifically what activities you would like to implement in those areas, I am more than happy to send that assessment to you. Please just email me. My email is below, and I am more than happy to equip you with that resource. Thank you for taking the time to join me on this episode of the Just Motherhood podcast. And while I have several episodes planned out and I'm super excited for what is to come, I do want to prioritize your needs and questions. If you have any questions about the topic of self-care or anything else that I mentioned today, please email me at justisabellaj@gmail.com. If you enjoyed this episode or found it helpful, please take a moment to leave a review so that this podcast can reach other mamas in need of encouragement and guidance. And please make sure that you subscribe or follow this podcast so that you don't miss out on future episodes. I pray that you have a wonderful week, and remember, you are loved, you are valued, and you are chosen. See you next week, mama.